Welcome to the Albemarle County Department of Elections Statement of Results Training Program. By program, I mean this one slide presentation. The Statement of Results is really where we record what our objective was for the day. We conducted a free, fair, open, legal election, and the Statement of Results is where we document all the voters who voted and the results of the tabulation of their votes. Every polling place has this goal, and this applies to all the places where votes are counted throughout the Commonwealth. The objective measure that documents accomplishing this goal is the Statement of Results, where we record what happened to all the ballots and what the results on those ballots were. In Albemarle County, we produce Statement of Results in a lot of places. There are the 30 numbered polling places out in the precincts. We have a separate Statement of Results for early voting, which breaks out its results by precinct. We have the Central Absentee Precinct, or CAP, by mail, where all the mailed in and dropped off absentee ballots that arrive by Election Day are counted, again, by precinct. We have the CAP post-election, where mailed-in absentee ballots that were postmarked by Election Day but arrive in the registrar's office before the Friday after the election by noon are counted. And then we also have a provisional precinct that is created after the Electoral Board adjudicates the provisional envelopes. And those envelopes that are accepted are opened and their ballots are counted in the provisional precinct. Again, just like CAP by mail, CAP post-election, and early voting, these are all counted by precinct. The Statement of Results is not quite identical for each different one of these places, but there are some common attributes of all of them. First, there are always two SORs. They should be duplicates with the same information on them, but one is labeled for the registrar as one is labeled for the circuit court. The opening or zero tapes and the closing results tapes from the DS300 are attached to both SOR copies. It's one of the reasons why you get so many copies of these things. If it's applicable to your particular election, the write-in results tape is also attached to both copies. And by applicable, we don't do that, have write-ins, that is, for primaries. We don't have write-ins for referendum-only elections. So we don't always have a write-in results tape. Both SOR copies are always placed in envelope 2. Both SOR copies are always signed by every EO working in the polling place. And the Code of Virginia makes something very clear. Completion of Statement of Results. This is 24.2-667. At the conclusion of determining the votes cast on voting devices and paper ballots, the officers of election shall verify that all required data has been accurately entered, sign both copies of the Statement of Results, and affirm that the statement is complete and the information thereon is true and correct. Very, very rarely, and not to my knowledge in Albemarle County, sometimes officers of election decide they don't like the outcome of the election, and therefore they don't want to sign the Statement of Results. If everything done in the polling place was done according to the law, you must sign. You shall sign. That's what 24.267 says. You shall sign the Statement of Results. You're not signing that you agree with the outcome. You're only signing that, to the best of your knowledge, the law was followed in your polling place. There are some differences between SORs. For example, not all Statements of Results have poll pad zero and closing tapes. If you are not checking in voters, for example, in the provisional precinct, you don't need to produce these. CAP by mail, CAP post-election, and provisional precinct SORs do not have a section for provisional ballots because they do not interact directly with voters who could cast provisional ballots. Also, it's uncommon for the precinct SORs and early voting SORs to have to include Section D of the SOR. Section D is all about hand counting ballots. It's not unusual for CAP by mail or the provisional precinct or even CAP post-election to have to hand count ballots. And the difference is, in the precinct SORs and early voting SORs, all or virtually all of the ballots that are included in the tabulation for the precincts and early voting have gone through a DS300. So they've already been scanned. They didn't need to be hand counted. They didn't have to be set aside to be hand counted later, whereas the ballots that come in to cap by mail, cap post-election, or provisional, they've never gone through a scanner. And when you go to feed them into the scanner, some of them won't scan. And then it's up to the officers of election who are present to hand count those ballots. You can't really talk about the statement of results without also talking about the printed return sheet. The printed return sheet is a very, very, very abbreviated statement of results. And it is a statement of results in that you attach a results tape from your DS300 to the printed return sheet. This is why the DS300s are configured to print 3 results tapes. The printed return sheet gets signed by all the officers of election, and it is placed in envelope 2A, different from envelope 2. It is, in many senses, a backup to envelope 2, because in envelope 2A should be exactly the same results that you have in envelope 2. You simply don't have all of the detail that is included with the statement of results. This brings up the topic of attaching tapes, and it's the same whether you're attaching tapes to the statement of results, either copy, or attaching tapes to the printed return sheet. And by tapes, we mean those long, skinny paper printouts that you get from thermal printers, either out of the DS300 or from the poll pad. And the critical point with attaching tapes is the tapes need to be attached so that they can be found and read. So if you roll the tape back up, just like it came off the printer roll, and you roll it back up, smash it flat, and staple it on, no one can expand the tape to read what its contents are. So instead of doing that, what you want to do is fold the tape to be about the length of an SOR page in a back-to-back, front-to-front manner like a pleat, so that you can flip through it and read the results. You place the top of each tape at the top of the page and ideally use one staple to attach all of the tapes to the page. If you need to use more than one staple, that's fine. And then with your now nicely folded tape, use a paper clip to hold the folded tapes organized. And you put that paper clip over the folded tapes and onto either the side of the statement of results or the side of the printed return sheet in about the middle of the page, so that when you put all of this in envelope 2, or in the case of the return sheet in envelope 2A, everything doesn't become unwound and disarranged, so that eventually when someone takes it out later, it will be easy for them to see what you did. And if you've done it all right, all we have to do when we go to review these is remove the paper clip and start flipping through the results or checking the zero tapes or whatever else we're looking for in the canvas of results. Here on this slide is an example of the statement of results. This is the registrar's copy. You would have another statement of results identical to this, just in the second line, instead of saying registrar's copy, it would say circuit court copy. On the left-hand side, it says what order to staple the tapes in. On the right-hand side, it identifies the information that it wants you to record on the statement. On the second page, you have an opportunity in section E to explain whether the number of voters being checked in match the number of ballots cast. And you also have a place here for all of the officers of election to sign. So let's go through completing the SOR in a little bit more detail. Section A is all about what you checked in on the poll pad. So basically you're using the zero tape from the poll pad and the summary report from the poll pad. Section B is all about what ballots were scanned on the DS300 and if you had any hand counts. Section C is where you record information about your provisional ballots, the total of provisional ballots as well as how many of each kind of provisional that you have. This all comes off the provisional ballot summary log. Section D is optional, and it's a section you fill in if you have any hand counts. It looks a little bit different for every different election because it has spaces for every race that's on that election to have hand counts recorded, have the DS300 counts recorded, and have them totaled up so anyone can see what you think the outcome should be. Section E is used to explain why there is any discrepancy between the number of voters checked in and the number of ballots counted. Do the A and B section totals match? And this does happen sometimes. It's not impossible for a voter to come in, particularly in a busy polling place, be issued a ballot. They've checked in, they were issued a ballot, they go to the marking booths, they get there, decide they don't want to vote today. They fold everything up and just stick it in their pocket, and then they slip out of the polling place without ever putting their ballot in the DS300. They're not supposed to do that. It's actually against the law if they do that. Most voters don't know it's against the law if they do that. But if that happens, your count will be off by 1. Other kinds of things can happen in polling places too. It's not the end of the world if the counts are completely off. What's very important, though, is to get the best explanation you can from the people who were there as to why they might be off. Section F of the Statement of Results is for every officer of election to sign. And as noted before, signing does not mean you agree with the outcome or you endorse the result. Signing means that you believe you followed the law in producing that result and that what's on that piece of paper accurately reflects what occurred in your polling place that day. In the process of signing, each officer of election will sign a minimum of 6 times. And this is a good thing to tell them so that they can be counting and know whether they've signed all 6 places. Where they'll sign 6 times is 3 times at the bottom of the results tapes because you will have 3 results tapes from your DS300. They'll sign once each on each of the 2 statement of result copies, and they'll sign once more on the print and return sheet for a total of 6. So who fills in the statement of results? Which officer of election has that as their job? Well, like everything else in a polling place, it's the officers of election who the chief has told to have this as their job that takes care of filling in the statement of results. It's our policy that where it's practicable, one officer of election from each major party is selected by the chief to prepare one of the copies of the statement of results. And then the 2 selected officers should compare their results and confer to make sure both copies reflect the same results and that each is complete. As is the case for all activities in the polling place, this process is subject to the oversight of the chief or their designated assistant chief. It can be very handy to designate an assistant chief to oversee the statement of results process. This enables the chief to keep doing the chief's job, which is making sure everything that's happening in the polling place is being done the right way and not just focusing on the statement of results. So the process to complete the SOR goes like this. First, gather the materials and the EOs that you need for the process at a table. And the materials they need will include the DS300 zero and results tapes, and they may include, depending on whether you're a precinct polling place or an early voting polling place or a cap polling place, they may include the provisional log to get the provisional counts by type, the opening and closing summary tapes from one of the poll pads, and any ballots that need to be hand counted. You fold the tapes and attach them to the left side of the SOR copy where indicated in the order given, and it's given right on the statement of results, what order the tapes go. Not surprisingly, the results tape from the DS300 goes on top, and the opening tapes from early in the morning go on the bottom. You complete all of the SOR sections other than D with regard to hand counts. If you do have hand counts, then count the votes and complete section D. If you don't have hand counts, don't complete section D. Don't include that in your statement of results. It's optional if there are no hand counts. In fact, we do not want to see section D if you've had no hand counts. You compare the 2 SOR copies, and that's the 2 officers who completed them. Compare the 2 SOR copies line by line to make sure they agree, and review and revise any discrepancies until they do. And they staple all the SOR pages together and deliver both copies to the chief. On this slide, we show the very top of the page for the two statement of results. Statement of results number 1 and number 2. Number 1 is the registrar's copy. Number 2 is the circuit court copy. The section in yellow should be pre-filled in for your particular polling place, whether it's capped by mail or Baker Butler precinct. That should be filled in with the date of the election and what election type it is. On the registrar's copy is where we would like you to attach the first zero tape that is printed from the DS300. This will include the configuration report that the DS300 automatically prints when it is started up. And this is a good time to remind you that zero tapes are signed also. They're signed by the two officers of the election who start up the DS300. And in this case, again, if practicable, there is one EO from each of the two major parties. Other than this one difference, where the configuration report goes on the registrar's copy, the tapes attached are identical for the registrar's copy and the circuit court copy, or copies number 1 and number 2. Here's an example of Statement of Results Part D, the hand-counted section, where it says quite clearly on it, use only if you have hand-counted ballots. On the first page is an example of how you should be entering things on SOR Part D. The second page and subsequent pages are customized for each election based on the races that occur in that election. And note where the red circles are. The red circles are where you've added everything across and you've added everything up and down, so you've got what is called your total. We'll talk about this more on the next slide. So to emphasize again, SOR Part D is used only if needed. It's election specific, so it shows the races and the candidates for the election. And some you may not have on your ballot. You may have one magisterial district and not another. Leave blank any races that are not on your ballot. 2 copies of Part D are completed, one for each of your SOR copies. You should not hand count the ballots twice. You should only do it once and copy the results to the second Part D. Hand count the ballots using the Virginia Guide to Hand Counting Ballots, which is a 25-page document describing a simple process for hand counting that should be available from the chief. Usually you can hand count ballots just by examining the ballots and quickly determining what the intent of the voter is. The Guide to Hand Counting Ballots lays out a beautiful process for teams of EOs with EOs from different parties looking and agreeing on every vote for every race and giving good examples of what to do when the voter does something peculiar with the ballot and what the guidance is for how to handle almost every imaginable situation. Now, you're counting not only the votes for each candidate, but also the overvotes and the undervotes. So overvotes occur when a voter marks more than one choice in a race where they're only allowed one choice, or more than the allowed number of choices in a race where they're allowed more than one choice. And the voter will have been told on the DS300, you've overvoted this race. Would you like to get the ballot back and get a new one, or would you like to cast it? And the voter can cast the ballot if they want, in which case the DS300 will record that they have an overvote. This is not very common. It may occur, but it's not very common. What's extremely common is undervotes. Undervotes occur when a voter does not vote for anyone in a particular race. And you see this quite commonly in down ballot races. So in the gubernatorial election where this example was taken from, almost everyone voted for the governor, but not everyone voted for the school board member for a particular magisterial district. If you don't vote for anyone in a race, then that race is undervoted. The DS300 is happy to accept undervotes without reporting them back to the voter. The only exception to that is if the voter votes for no one on a ballot, so none of the races have a vote recorded, then the DS300 will tell the voter that they have a blank ballot. Would they like to try again? And still the voter can cast it. So because you count not only the votes for each candidate, but also the overvotes and the undervotes, you will have the same total count for each race. So the governor might have gotten 100 votes in that race. You might only have had 50 votes in the school board member's race, but there would be 50 undervotes in that race. So the total would still be 100. And this is a great check to make sure that your hand counting is recording everything correctly, because at the end of the day, where all those red circles were on the previous slide, those totals, they should be all the same for every voter, because every ballot that went in was either a vote for a particular candidate or an undervote or an overvote, and those things all add up to the same number of pages that were fed into the machine. So check your math when you total the votes, and then attach Part D at the back of each SOR copy. And again, only if it was used. When we have discrepancies in our Canvas totals after the election, almost always they occur where the number of undervotes has not been counted quite correctly. So we're going to go through one example here of hand counting. If for a contest you had hand counted 4 ballots for candidate A, and hand counted 3 ballots for candidate B, and 2 of the ballots had no marks on them for this race, then your results would be 4 for A and 3 for B, obviously, and 2 undervotes, and you had a total of 9 ballots. As mentioned before, overvotes can occur, but they're much less common. So if there were 5 contests on this ballot, every one of them would have a total of 9 votes added to the DS300 results, because you had 9 hand-counted ballots. Some of them might have over or under votes, but your total for each contest would be 9, because it reflects the total number of ballots processed. I'm going to say this one more time. Omit Part D of the statement of results if it's not needed. So if you have no hand-counted ballots, don't include Part D. If you leave it out, that signals that you had no hand counts. If you include it but leave it blank, that makes us wonder if you had hand counts and meant to fill it out. So when the SOR is complete, call it in. So if you have 2 EOs, complete the form and compare the results. Had all the officers sign the tapes and the SOR and the printed return sheet. You've attached all the tapes. Then the chief should review the results, and then the chief calls them into the registrar's office. Now, one of the things that we are required to do at the end of the day in the polling place under 24.2-657 is that we have to announce the results. And the perfect time to do that is when we call those results into the registrar's office. So when you call in the results, quiet the room, gather all the officers of election around, put your phone on speaker if possible so everyone can hear the results as you read them off when asked for them by the registrar or someone from the registrar's office. That way you've accomplished 2 things at one time. You've reported the information to the registrar so they can upload it into the state system, and you've met the requirements of the code to announce the results in the polling place. So again, at the end of the SOR process, place both copies of the SOR in envelope number 2, place the printed return sheet in envelope 2A, close and seal both envelopes with a seal bearing the signatures from 2 EOs, and you return these envelopes with the other election materials to the registrar's office on election night. The purpose of the election is to determine the will of the voters on whatever the issue is that's on the ballot. The statement of results is where their will is recorded. This is done at the end of a long process, but like everything else, it is deserving of your time and attention to get it right. Your SOR is used by the registrar to report and the electoral board to certify the results to the state. It's a key part of what we do, and it is the crowning moment in the evening. And we thank you for taking the time to get it done right.